South Korea's economy is right on track for recovery, according to a think tank based in South Korea. Now, it's the first time such a related local body has proposed a 2% range growth forecast. We turn to Professor Shin Se-don for more. Great to have you back, Professor Shin.
Good morning.
So, first off, South Korea's economy is believed to expand by 2.6% this year. Strong global demand for chips will be the main driver for that projected growth. The question is, will exports of chips lead the country's growth for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I mean, for the first 4 months, semiconductor exports has been growing about 10%, the 20%. And definitely is going to lead, Korean economic growth. The problem is the semiconductor exports is about a little less than 20% of our total exports. And the problem is, what about the other 80% of exports, including steels, including automobile? And there's a pretty much a sign that, export in the automobile and export in the steel, it is kind of a little stagnating. So even though semiconductor exports are increasing very rapidly for the first 4 months, you have to see what's going to happen on the exports of the automobile, steel, and the chemical products. So it is not pretty definite, whether the export growth will be continuing in the second half of this year.
Professor Shin, that's also in line with the possibility that growth centered on exports may weaken with global trade shrinking because of U.S. protectionism that could possibly deepen after the November U.S. presidential election. Is this a possible scenario? What's your take on this?
Well, whether U.S. presidential election will affect Korean trades, well, I doubt it. But whether, the protection of the United States against the Chinese exports, I think that's going to have a secondary effect on Korean export in the sense that, if protectionism by the United States affects Chinese exports, then many of the Korean companies are exporting to, China for their exports. So it would have a secondary effect on Korean export. But overall, I think it would not be as significant as, most people will believe.
Well, concerns do linger, though, over sluggish consumption that we have to talk about as consumer prices remain pretty high here in the country. It's also forecasting, the KDI report is forecasting that consumer prices will go up 2.6% this year. Is this a good sign?
Well, yeah, consumption price remaining staying below 3%, that will be a good sign. But for the last couple of years, real Korean economic problem is sluggish consumption or domestic demand. And actually, for the first quarter, the domestic demand has negative growth, negative contribution to Korean economy. So real problem in Korean economy right now, export doing very fine. But the problem is consumption is very sluggish. And there are many reasons, private consumption is sluggish in Korea because of high interest rate payment, and sluggish, housing prices. But the economy is not doing pretty good other than the export side. So real key for Korean economic, growth is whether consumption will pick up in the second half. And that, I think, is critically depending upon the future course of interest rates.
Definitely. Well, the report also added that it doesn't believe it believes that no additional pump priming steps are needed at the moment. And, some people are saying that such comments are targeted the main opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung's pledge to provide cash handouts to everyone here in the country. Now, Professor Shin, do you as an expert argue that there's no need for those additional pump priming steps?
Right. We know that this year economic growth will be about 6% according to KDI, about 2.5% for another institution. So it is definitely true that Korean economic growth will be higher than 2%. And if you have to pay, $250,000 to everybody, that has to be paid last year, in which economic growth was 1.4%. So I think when economy is growing over 2%, it is, I think, premature, for the government or for the political party to argue that we have to give, 250,000 for everybody. I think it's almost nonsense.
All right, Professor Shin, before I let you go briefly, the KDI projects the Korean economy will grow 2.1% next year in 2025. Now, that's lower than what we were expecting this year, which is at 2.6. Why a lower growth outlook then?
Yeah, 100%. That is because KDI is projecting the export growth in next year, 2025, will be about 2.4%, which, in this year, they predicted that it's going to be 5.6%. So the main difference in economic growth rate this year, which is 2.6, and 2.1 next year, I think that is due to about half the rate of growth in export from 5.6% to 2.4%.
All right, we still have a full half of the year left for the 2024, so we'll see how that goes. And thank you, Professor Shin, so much for your time and your analysis this morning. You have a wonderful day.
Always my pleasure.